Hey folks, it's Ben. We're here with our 1987 Pontiac Fiero SE, the 2.8 liter automatic. But what we're doing today has nothing to do with that, but has everything to do with 1984 to 1987 Pontiac Fieros all, is we're going to be repacking the bearings just because it's a newly acquired car. We don't know last time it was done, so let's just go ahead and do it again type of scenario. The grease looked okay, but honestly, I would just assume do it again myself. So this will be a video, and I'm going to keep it edited quick so you can get to the point and you can do it yourself. So first thing we'll need to do is remove this brake caliper, and that's held on with a pair of 19mm bolts. And so what we'll do is we'll release those, hang up the brake caliper, straighten the wheel out, and pop the cap off. So we're see if this angle will work for us. We're gonna see if we can break these free. The chemical you see on them is called screw loose, which is one of my favorites. And these are a little crusty looking, but they are, there we go. And we're gonna put a breaker bar on this thing too. Hopefully you lift up and break it free. We can ratchet down a little bit. The camera. All the leverage you can get, all the way on the end of that lever. That was it. Yep. And then if you don't have too bad of a ridge on your rotor, in which case we don't, it's actually fairly nice. I'm going to take a coat hanger here and slide this off the rotor. Come on. I usually remember to bring a screwdriver to help pry the top off, but there we go. And then right around between where the pads go, I'll hook my coat hanger and then just hang it off the suspension somewhere, just so the weight of this thing isn't bared by the hose. They fly all over me right now. Get off me. Or a spider, one of the two. Lots of biting spiders. Somewhere. There we go. So now that we've got that hung out all the way, we can now spend our attention to this cap, which I don't even know if it's on frame or not. Yep. Boom. There's the cap. So we're going to use a prying device like a flathead screwdriver or this thing here, and we're just going to pry that off. It's just pressed in. So there's our cap. You can inspect the bearing grease to determine if you want to do that or not. In this case it's black, so we'll probably, and originally it was a dark blue, so we're going to want to change it out regardless. So next up is a pair of pliers. And we have a cotter pin we're going to remove. Maybe build, yeah, maybe bent it over the.
Where's the other tail?
It's right there. Maybe not.
It's not. It doesn't have another tail. It's weird, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what it is. The cotter pin's gone. These are cheap and easy, so typically I just like to replace them. So you can feel the spin of it, and you can shake it back and forth. It's nice and steady, so that's exactly what we want. So, and it doesn't feel like it's grinding or anything, so I don't think any damage has occurred. 15/16 is the size of that nut, because this is a metric car. So we'll set our ratchet to loosen, and you should be able to just pop that off.
15/16 isn't metric.
I know that. It's already set.
I know, I'm thinking.
Yeah. That's all you need. It just needs to get broken free, and then we can finger that off, and we can actually see what's next. Cool, so we've got the nut off, and next there is a washer that's got a key on it that keeps it from rotating. We want to pry that out too. And then it falls, and if the bearing wants to come out, grab it as well. Probably should have put gloves on at this point, but go ahead and pull that bearing out. And then once that's free, just take the whole rotor and slide it right out. we'll go to the bench now and take a peek. So we pulled everything off. So we have our rotor assembly with no nose on it, that's fine. And we have our dust cap, which is awful dirty. And we have our castle nut and our washer and our outer smaller bearing. And the only thing we're missing here are 2 brake bolts, which we'll bring up here. I mentioned that because everything you see here we're going to clean thoroughly. Now we're seeing actually 2 colors of grease here. We're looking at a red grease that was on beforehand actually, and then there was a blue grease. So the person who changed this, good effort on their part, but I like to see everything perfectly wiped clean before we reassemble anything. So let's just go ahead and finish our disassembly. So we need to take and pull this seal. Now this seal, before we get too far, was not completely assembled correctly. This should be flush with the whole ring here, or at least equal. This is super deep on this end, super out on this end, so it was not driven in correctly. If they're in good shape, you can reuse them, but put that in there and turn the screwdriver, yep, and that pops right out. So like you could totally, reuse this one, but for 12 bucks a piece, less in the States, no doubt, just use a new one. It's got a new inner seal,
Can we pull that guy out?
all that fun stuff. Yep, and use your finger to pull that out.
That's gross.
Okay, so now our rotor is actually ready to get cleaned. And by that, I mean, get in here with a rag and wipe everything out. I don't want to see a lick of grease in here. I want it to be perfectly clean. See how scruffy it is out here? Let's get rid of that scale. We want to make this super duper clean. And we also want to wipe down our bearings so that we can repack them. And that's the main part of this video, will be repacking those. So I'm going to clean this and we're going to wipe everything down so we get all the old grease off, and we'll meet you right back here. Sweet, so we got everything wiped down. But obviously our bearings are still full of dirty grease, and we want to put in the nicest, best grease we can. So there's 2 ways to do this. There's the easy way, which anyone can do. And there's the hard way, which is what we're going to do, just because it's nice to see both ways. The easiest way is to actually just get a bearing packer. And what this does essentially is it's got 2 halves here, and you just put the bearing between them, insert this little Zerk fitting, which is what your grease gun connects to, roll it in there, and just put the grease to it, and it will blow grease all the way through, and your bearing will be packed with fresh new grease. Because there's old grease still in there. We didn't chemically clean them, we just kind of wiped them down with a paper towel. The other way is to pack it in by hand, and what I mean by that is exactly what I'm going to show you now. And then we'll do a time lapse of the other bearing. But if I can get my... You definitely want to wear gloves for this. I mean, as a kid I never did, but
You're not a kid
it
anymore.
obviously developed, yeah, I'm obviously developmentally slower, so. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah.
Just edit this part out.
Makes a huge difference.
Okay, so I have MotoMaster grease here. This is a wheel bearing and chassis lubricant. It's good for wheel bearings, suspensions, all that fun stuff, and it's an open tub. And so it's pink, so it's a defined color. I don't think it's even synthetic, it's just a regular grease here. I'm gonna have to do it up here for you guys. So what I'm gonna do is actually take a large blob of grease and put it in my hand right here. I'm gonna take my bearing, and see how there's an opening right here in the back? I'm gonna try to compress that grease on my hand into that crack. And you'll notice that when I do, and my form is very dated and I haven't done it in a long time, but as I go along, eventually, you'll start to see the old grease come out of the bearing. Like I say, if I don't suck too bad at it, which right now I'm not doing great. We already did the other side of the car, so I got some. There we go, it's slow. But you need to work that back and forth. So you see that old stuff coming out right there on top? As you do it more, your form gets better, and you get better at getting the grease out. And you can see how it's multicolored at this point, maybe, if the camera behaves. So you see some of the dark, bad grease, and some of the good grease that's getting crammed through. And then you just turn the bearing a little bit and keep going. And every now and then, maybe wipe your finger on that old stuff, wipe it on your rag, get it off the bearing. And you want to do this until the entire bearing is packed full of new grease. And see, you'll get on a run where it just really just comes out of there. The center stuff's still good. I can put that back on my finger. And you just go around, and we'll time lapse the rest of this until you get all that grease. See where the bearing packer's a lot easier, but you just keep going until you get all that grease done, and we'll catch you when we're done. So you've done all your hard work and you've got your bearings now repacked with grease. So what we're actually going to do now is take our rotor. Now, what I've done off camera, and I haven't mentioned, but I will here, is we want to also lay your peepers on this thing. Make sure there's no cracking or discolorization on this outer race of the bearing here. And same with the bearing. You might not know what a normal bearing looks like, but you will know if it looks cracked or broken, or if one of these rollers is gone, or something along those lines. You'll know that, yikes, that's not supposed to be like that. Now, before we put it back in, you go crazy with the grease, right? This thing wants to swim in it, essentially. It's essentially going to be the lubrication for this thing for the next, I don't know the service interval, 15,000 miles? Probably every time you do the brakes. For this car, it'll probably be the last time we see it in 10 years, because it might get 1,000 miles a year on it or whatever. So it'll probably be okay. So this bearing is wet, and where it rides is now wet with this new clean grease that we have here. So we just go to town, and then you just drop it in gently into that race, and you poke it around so it sits there, and it should be able to turn freely and all that fun stuff. And then you take some more grease and you make it all friendly. So you got grease everywhere. Thing about the extra grease is it will catch dirt before the bearing will. So that's a good thing to have. So we've got all sorts of grease on this outer bearing here. Now it's time to reinstall our seal. And so to do that, what I'm actually going to do is, here's what it looks like. It's an oil seal, actually, even though it's holding grease back. And I just touched grease, so my hands are filthy. Thanks. We'll take it out of the package here, and here it is. So it's exactly how you saw it before. It's got a rubber seal component on the inside, and then this metal part on the outside. And I see how it's cupped. You want the cup to face in. So we're actually going to move this just like so. It'll be very specific for your application. And then I'm going to use my buddy over here. I got a rubber mallet and part of a wooden block. And with it fairly squared away, I'm just gonna lightly tap this thing in. Where it's high, I hammer it in a little bit. And we just want to get this thing equal all the way around so that you can run your finger and it's fairly flush. You don't want any half ridges out or anything like that. And what this does is your spindle will actually come in here and seal against that ring, and that'll keep all the dust and dirt out of this side. The dust cap on this part here keeps the dirt out on the other side, but this seal keeps the dirt and stuff out on that side. So this end, we're actually done with it. So we're ready to go, but first off I'm going to clean, for those playing the home game, here are our rusty brake nuts. So we're going to go ahead and hit the bench grinder of these, clean them up, clean this up as well, and I think we'll meet you back at the car. Sweet. So we're back here. I keep saying sweet instead of so. We're back here at the car. So we have our spindle. So let's get all this grease off of the darn thing. And paying attention to the inside here, because this is where our seal will actually ride against, and our bearing to a degree. So we want to make sure that's nice and clean. And while I'm here, I'm actually going to come and make sure that these areas are scruffed clean in here as well. And we'll put anti-seize on those surfaces because I'm from the Northeast United States and they like to salt the roads. And if you don't clean it and anti-seize it, whatever it's bolted to, it becomes one with. So we just anti-seize all the things so that we have some chance. Now, looking at this, we're not seeing any massive cracking or overheating, not a lot of color changing that you see there. The bearing surfaces appear to be here and here, I believe, because this is kind of a grouped up. So this would be machined, that's machined, and I believe this portion is going to be used for our assembly. So we look pretty good there, but we want to get all the nooks and cranny stuff out of here as well. Get those threads as clean as we can, and then I'm going to go grab the rotor and the jelly. The grease, and so from the bench we have our assembly here, and what we're actually going to do is take your finger, dip it in some grease, and get that seal greasy actually, because it's going to be riding on metal. So just the inside is all we need.
Sorry. You didn't say that.
Yeah, just the inside, and then we'll take and slide that up like so, and you're going to hold it up there. Next, we're going to take our outer bearing, which is the tiny guy. Make sure it's
pointy end in, right?
Yeah, but make sure it's covered in grease on
it's greasy.
every surface.
Yeah, it's greasy.
And what we can do, hold on, is probably should have did this before, is stick some grease on that race if you can. Just because we want grease everywhere. All right, now stick that bearing in, pointy, like I said, pointy side in. Perfect. Wiggle it around a little bit. She's good. Next, you take your keyed, and we can see it for sure now. Yeah, I'll show you on the camera here. It's got that key on it. There's a groove on the top, so we'll have that key go on. Okay, that's greasy too. And then we take our castle nut. Make sure that your indentations are outside or facing you. So. It goes on a lot nicer once everything's clean. Now, here's where we get into this is I'd say the judgiest part of a bearing repacking is, where do we put it, essentially? How tight is tight enough, right? Because right now, we actually don't have any play in our bearing, so that's cool. But if we backed it up a hair, you'll have a little bit of, you'll feel some thumping, in theory. Give it a spin or two here to kind of distribute the grease around. You'll feel a little bit of thumping, so you tighten it in a little bit. And so you want the bearings to not be rattly. You want them to be tight, but you don't want to make them tight. You kind of want that middle land. And where you're dancing with the devil here is the castle nut here, because you'll want it so that if you back it up one, it's loose, but if you back it forward or move it forward one, that's as tight as you want it to be. So like, we are not loose in that situation here, and I can see our hole is, it was good. You want to tighten it a little more, but I think where's the holes right here.
Yeah.
So we have a little wiggle, unfortunately. So we want to move it up one more hole. We might need to use
I'm not gonna move up one more hole without help.
Yep. So give it a little help. Thing is, it's still freshly greased. There's still grease between every surface. So I don't want any play in this. So we'll tighten it down a little bit. And then we'll back it off some and see how we are. And this is the dance you play until you get that happy medium of it's not loose.
Like we have to.
Like back up a hole, yep. Because that's we're lined up with the cotter pin in that regard. But we are loose, so we need to go one more. We have to. It's bearing law. Try that one there.
Not quite there yet.
Yeah, you're there.
There now.
And so now we've got no play, but we know we're not as tight as, you know, we're not putting a ton of force on that. So that's where I like to keep my bearings at. And that's how you do that. So next is our cotter pin. So I usually put the top facing as up as I can, and then we use our pliers, which are now hiding on the ground somewhere.
Right here.
And what I often like to do to help me, depends on the size of your cotter pin. These aren't grossly thick. So I take a screwdriver and I actually put the top of the pin in it. Okay, so just bring it out a little bit, and we'll just take this and like so, and then we'll bend the one ear left, one ear right, knowing that we're going to put a cup over this whole thing, so we need to get those bent so that they are out of the way. And this, of course, keeps our castle nut from backing itself off, and everybody's happy. That looks probably good there. You can probably pull that core in a little bit and just tighten that so the cutter, it's not wiggly around in the hole there, and we'll be good to put the cap on. So our cotter pin's on. Next up is our cup, and that is just a friction fit on there. So start off nice. Of course, you're not going to be able to push it in. Some people might bang it with your hand, but obviously someone's used a big hammer in the past. We're going to use a rubber mallet and just gently tap it in straight. And it won't actually, this one doesn't actually rest against the...
Is that it?
Yep. Just make sure she's... That's about it. And now she's in. Next up, we got to put the brakes back on, right? So let's, we'll clear the rest of this junk out of here, and we'll back the camera up and we'll put the brakes back on. So New England anti-seize, right here is a mating surface. Here's a mating surface. And we're gonna double it up and do it right on the brake side too. That'll squish out. Don't get used to these calipers being this color, because they are going to get painted. What color I will leave you in suspense with. So we've got those done, and now I'm going to put some on my... It seems counterintuitive, because these bolts you don't want coming off your brakes, but once again, where I'm from, they will become one with the car, and they'll strip their head off before they actually come out there. So we'll put them anti-seize on them, and then we'll just put them on tight. That'll get rid of the friction of the fastener. Now I have what I call mechanics herpes on here. What we call herpes is glitter when you're doing crafts, and in this case we're doing car crafts, so we have anti-seize glitter on my fingers, which now will get on everything. So we've unattached that from our suspension. These have nice retainers on them, I'll give you that. So these pads are well retained, so I can work them on back to the rotor. I can see where I'm going here. There we go, bam. Hold that about where it needs to be. And come in from the back with my nut and get that started. All right, we're near the end, so we got them both in. Now these, I don't have a torque rating for you, except tight. Like not forever tight, but you don't want to worry about them tight.
Not forever tight, but falling off is bad tight.
Yeah, exactly. Falling off is bad, but you do want to get them off eventually. So we got anti-seize on them, so that helps, and that makes the bolt slipperier and actually lets it get tighter as well. So we got anti-seize on all that. So that's it. Except the fact that our brakes are really kind of out of whack. This car has not gone anywhere in probably 15 years. So let's look at that going for us here. We'll put the brake on and off a little bit and free up this guy. But that's how you change the grease or repack your bearings in a 1984 to 1987 Pontiac Fiero. The 88 boys, which we also happen to have one, sealed front bearing assembly. Just take it off, put a new one on, move on. But no maintenance required. But these guys, it's nice to take them apart, repack them, and they'll be your loyal friend forever. If you have any comments, leave them, questions, ask them, and please subscribe to my channel, Turbo231, for more exciting, awesome adventures of this and other Fieros, and all sorts of other cars. There's tons of stuff to do and see, and we will see you next time. I think I'll time-lapse the 1,000 flies that are up above us here on a light there. That won't be cool.